You're listening to a 3CR podcast recorded in a 3CR community radio studio in Melbourne, Australia. If you like what you hear, please consider donating or subscribing so we can keep bringing you more independent community content. For more information, go to 3cr.org.au.
Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And a warning that this episode of Doin Time contains audio images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have died and graphic discussion of deaths in custody. This is Marissa and I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. And I have not been doing the show for the last 2 weeks and I'm back in action now. First of all, just wanted to let listeners know to thank you very, very, very much. We met our radiothon target of $950 and a little bit over. So thank you very much, and I will be reading out all the donations again later on. First up on the show, we will hear from David Pollock from ISJA, and he will talk about the Aboriginal death in custody of JC in very general terms, as there is currently an upcoming inquest. And also he will speak about Cleveland Dodd as well in context of the work of ISJA, which is paramount here, as we will discuss ongoing support for JC's family and also Cleveland Dodd. Very, very general terms, there is an upcoming inquest coming up, as I said, for JC, and we need to be careful of contempt of court, but it is fitting that we do speak about the background and about what happened and discuss some of the work of ISJA. I'll leave David to introduce his lovely bio in a second, but before we get on to David, I'm just going to say here that we'll bring you an interview later on with Andrew Yule from Jesuit Social Services, who will talk about the Youth Justice Bill introduced into Parliament last week. I invited Andrew onto the show because the Human Rights Law Centre put out a media release as well, and I will be looking at this too throughout the show. The Doin Time show is a safe environment for members of marginalised communities to come and speak about what concerns them, and raising the criminal age has been something that the Doin Time show has been calling out for many, many years. Supporters of JC say that 30 years after the Aboriginal Deaths in Custody Royal Commission, there is still no equality. The family of a Geraldton woman shot dead by a Western Australian police officer has said there is no equality and no justice for Aboriginal people after the constable, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was acquitted of her murder. And joining us shortly is David Pollock from ISJA. Hello, David. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Marissa. Thanks for having me on.
Lovely to have you. I'm hoping that you were able to hear that intro and get some context.
I did hear that intro. Thank you very much. If you'd like me to introduce myself, my
please.
name is Dave.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
I'm a settler of predominantly Irish and English descent, born on Bangarang Yorta Yorta country in northeast Victoria. But I've been living down here in Naarm or Melbourne for over half my life on Wurundjeri, Wurrung and Burrong countries. I've been with ISJA Melbourne, that's Indigenous Social Justice Association, Melbourne, for just over a decade now. and is just been doing work advocating against Aboriginal deaths in custody for about 20 years now.
Indeed, and the reason why I invited you onto the show, Dave, was really just to talk about, in simple terms, really, about what sort of support is ISJA going to be providing for the families.
Yeah, sure. So we're running 2 appeals at the moment, one for Nadine Dodd and her family, and one for Bernadette Clark and her family as well. And both of those are essentially just about garnering material support for both families as they travel to Perth mostly for those inquests. So it's the second part of her son Cleveland Dodd's inquest later this month on the 22nd of July for Nadine and her family. And that will run for 3 weeks until the 9th of August. And so Nadine's travelling with her toddler twins and her Uncle Stuart and Auntie Lana. And so they need some funds to help pay for their accommodation there while they're in Perth, but also for travelling and that kind of thing as well. And it's a similar story for JC and her family. Their inquest actually started today in Perth. So they've travelled down from Geraldton, which is like 400 kilometres away. And so we're still taking funds for them for the same reasons, really, to just help out with their accommodation and travel expenses and that type of thing. You can find both of those appeals on our Facebook page, and they have both Nadine and Bernadette's direct bank account details there, so that's how you can transfer funds to them.
We do have a little bit of a listenership in prison, and also some listeners that don't have Facebook. Are you able to read those out? If not, it doesn't matter. People can call 3CR on 9419 8377, care of Doin Time Show, and we can get those details for you. I got you out of that one, didn't I?
You did, sorry. I was trying to log into Facebook madly, yes.
Well, a lot of people do have internet these days anyway, but yeah. But this is fantastic that Indigenous Social Justice Association Melbourne has been able to do the funds. How did that come about?
By being approached by both Bernadette and Nadine, asking if we could do an appeal. We had been doing one for Bernadette and the Clark family for, I think it's been a couple of months now. And I think Nadine might have seen that and asked for a similar kind of thing for her family here.
What's actually really sad, and just to, generally speaking, to look at Cleve, and she died in hospital in October last year after allegedly self-harming in the cell, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. So Nadine found out about that from a phone call from Corrective Services. She found out both that he had been hospitalised after that incident, but also at the time that he'd been moved from where he was in Banksy Hill Youth Detention to the notorious Unit 18 in Casuarina Prison, which is an adult facility. So that was the first time that she heard that he'd been moved there, and then that he was in a critical condition and on life support in hospital. And tragically, he passed away about a week afterwards.
It's quite unprecedented, isn't it, that he was the first young person, isn't it, to die in custody?
Yeah, well, at least since 1980, the first person, that's when they started keeping records for youth detention, and the first person to pass away in youth detention. That being said, he was in an adult facility. Yeah.
ISJA has historically been known to build the movement to stop Aboriginal deaths in custody. What are some of your thoughts, generally speaking, on deaths in custody and the Royal Commission?
Well, I would just preface that by saying I think the families of people who've lost loved ones to state and carceral violence of the settler state have been leading that movement.
Sure.
And it's just very fortunate to be able to support some of them over the last 20 years. I think in recent years, it's been amazing to see the establishment of First Nations organisations, explicitly First Nations organisations like the Dudjuma Foundation, who have been also leading that work, but also organisations like Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, which has become has put a lot more resources into advocacy and doing some of that political work as well. So I guess the orientation of ISJA has changed over many years, from doing some of that work perhaps when other organisations weren't necessarily on the scene, and now a lot of ISJA's work is really trying to fold in behind those organisations and support some of their campaigning. I agree with you. I think that in terms of the Royal Commission, those organisations, as has ISJA, have been asking for the full implementation of all 339 recommendations from the Royal Commission. There has been very few of those recommendations implemented, and a lot of those have been kind of partially implemented or implemented in ununiform ways. So it's still, while I think a lot of people are disappointed in the aftermath of the Royal Commission, it's still a really important landmark event, I think, for being able to point to all of the evidence and all of the avenues for addressing Indigenous deaths in custody that the state refuses to pursue.
Absolutely. And the reason why I invited you on the show as well is because these inquests are going to be ongoing. One has already started. JC's inquest has already started, hasn't it, David? And then we've got Cleveland starting soon, and it's really important that the family has funds to function, isn't it?
Absolutely. To be present, as difficult as that might be, is a really important thing for families. So JC's inquest started today, and that's going to continue on into the next week as well in Perth. And Cleveland Dodd, it's actually like the second part of the inquest, and that starts on the 22nd of July and goes for 3 weeks. But that was a very high-profile inquest, the first part of that, and we heard some really damning testimony, particularly from staff in Unit 18, about just how appalling the conditions were there, just how much of a lack of training they received, and how ill-equipped they were to be able to respond to the circumstances that were prevalent in there. There was, damning testimony from one nurse who was there. The unit didn't have a dedicated mental health unit or support services there, so she was the only medical staff there on shift. And, she made comments saying that, she felt like it was that all of the young people there were at risk of self-harming, and that it was impossible for her to keep them safe.
And when was that? When was that testimony happening?
That was the first part of the inquest, so that was I think about almost 2 months ago now.
With Cleveland Dodd?
Yeah, correct.
And then you've got the second part of the inquest happening what date?
That begins on the 22nd of July.
Okay. Yeah, look, there's been so much going on. We've also had Heather Calgarrett's inquest as well, and that's reconvening in September to hear the oral submissions, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe it is.
Look, it's been great having you on the show, David, and really this was just a general thing, as I said, in regards to both inquests. Are there any final comments that you want to make, or any more renewed calls for support?
Just that if people feel like they can, to please consider contributing to those appeals, but also to others as well. There's ongoing appeals. You could go to Pay the Rent, that does a lot for families who've lost a loved one to state violence as well, supporting to organisations like BELS, others in the movement. That's an important thing to do as well. I don't think that, unfortunately, deaths in custody will stop until there is a really popular movement that can hold the state to account. It's good to see some traction starting to gain in Victoria with some closing of some prisons, and I believe your next guest is going to talk about youth justice reform.
Correct.
We've had the reform of the Bail Act, which the Nelson family were instrumental in, even though they didn't get all of Pockham's Law implemented in that. I think there's real considerable traction and movement that's gaining in Victoria, and that's because of a social movement that's been led by the families of those who have been killed in custody.
Absolutely, and it's some of the clauses in the sections of the Royal Commission talks a lot about health, doesn't it? And the fact that there needs to be a lot more implementation of the recommendations.
Absolutely. I mean, if we were thinking about JC, she wouldn't have come in contact with the criminal justice system were it not, if she had reasonable access to medical care. So the state government in Western Australia closed down the Sobering Up Centre in Geraldton a year or so before she unfortunately was killed. So the lack of services, whether it's explicit health services or other social services that could be considered as contributing to people's health in a holistic sense, the defunding of those systematically with, neoliberal turns in governments, and particularly the defunding of those to the communities who are marginalised or least served by representational politics, that contributes to no small degree to deaths in custody.
And I believe also with Cleveland Dodd that there's going to be quite a few hearings that are listed for later on in the year as well, because of all this alleged self-harm that was meant to have been happening.
Yes, yeah, I'm not sure about the specificity of those, I'm sorry. But
we won't discuss that too much, actually, because it's still, not under investigation, but we need to actually be really careful with that. But I just wanted to put that in just to show that the Royal Commission into deaths in custody recommendations have not been implemented.
That's correct. Well, very few of them, very few.
David, thank you so much for coming onto the program. It's lovely to meet you. I know that you were also the MC for the TJ Speak Out organised by ISJA earlier on in the year, and I played some of that audio.
Yeah, thank you for being there to cover that as well, and thank you for having me on the program today.
Lovely to have you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Risa. Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was David Pollack from the Indigenous Social Justice Association Melbourne, and that audio was actually recorded by 3CR programmers, and I played that in February. But yeah, we talked a lot about Aboriginal deaths in custody and the upcoming inquests of Cleveland Dodd and JC, and the importance of raising funds to support those families to go to court, to the inquests, which would be very, very harrowing indeed. And we are going to be going out with an announcement, and I will introduce our next guest shortly.
Beyond the Bars for NAIDOC Week 2024. Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. At 3CR, NAIDOC Week is a time we dedicate to hearing the voices of some of the most marginalised people in our society. Aboriginal women and men in the prison system. From 11 a.m. each weekday, Monday the 8th of July to Friday the 12th of July, we'll take you inside 6 Victorian prisons: Dame Phyllis Frost, Barwon, Fulham, Loddon, Margate and Port Phillip. Tune in to 8:55 a.m. 3CR Digital, streaming online at 3cr.org.au or via Community Radio Plus app. To hear stories, songs, opinions and poems from the men and women inside, connecting with culture and community with Beyond the Bars for NAIDOC Week 2024. 3cr.org.au/Beyond the Bars for all the details.
Can't keep carrying on, the change is coming.
Come down to Cafe Gummo at 711 High Street, Thornbury on Friday the 5th of July for a night of solidarity and Greek and Latin-inspired sounds to support the Greek Resistance Bulletin and to keep your radical radio station 3CR on the air. Come down at 8 p.m. to hear Anatreptics play classic rembetiko from the Greek underground of the 1930s and 40s, and Oscar Ponsel perform solo on stage to keep the station of solidarity and resistance on the air for another year. Tickets are $10 at the door, and doors open at 8. This Lenti for the Greek Resistance Bulletin and 3CR is at Cafe Gummo, 711 High Street, Thornbury, on Friday the 5th of July, starting at 8 o'clock. Check the 3CR website fundraisers page for full details. Sound on for solidarity.
And you're back with the Doin Time show, 3CR. Joining me in the studio, which is really refreshing, is Andrew Yule, Director of Advocacy and Strategic Communications, and he's from Jesuit Social Services. And we're going to be speaking about the Youth Justice Bill. And as I said in my introduction, I invited Andrew onto the show because the Human Rights Law Centre put out a media release, and I'll be looking at that too throughout the show. But basically, it's looking at the age of criminal responsibility for young people and really looking at evidence and what's happening with the bill and what implications will that have. The Doin Time show has had a really, really long history of looking at this and having a look at the fact that children do not belong in prisons. They belong with their families and with the schools, and certainly not having an electronic bracelet. Andrew, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you indeed. So you've been with Jesuit Social Services for quite a while, haven't you?
I have. I've been with the organisation for about 10 years now. And interestingly, if we're talking today about raising the age of criminal responsibility, it's something that we were campaigning for that entire time that I've been with the organisation. So it's certainly been a long time coming. We're not fully there yet. We can't let down our guard. We've got a lot of work still to do to make sure it happens in the right way and to make sure that it happens all the way up to raising it all the way up to 14, which is still a bit of time away. But perhaps we'll get into the details of that in a moment.
Absolutely. And in September 2023, the Youth Justice Commission recommended that the Victorian government raise the age to 14, and that's following recommendations made by numerous reports and inquiries. What's the position of Jesuit Social Services about that?
We certainly support raising the age of criminal responsibility to 14. In fact, we think that no one under the age of 16 should be held in detention. There's lots of evidence for that around the world, but I think you put it well in the intro that we know that young people, even when they do carry out sort of harmful behaviours at times, we need to address what's going on, what's driving that behaviour. And we need to do that in ways that support them and help them address trauma and things that are going on in their lives and support them to re-engage with education, with family, with community, and with activities that are really going to help them flourish in the long term, that help them take accountability and understand the impacts of their actions perhaps, but also with a view to ensuring those young people can flourish and can be a great member of the community as time goes on.
Can you just tell us what is the Youth Justice Bill? It was introduced last week into Parliament. What is it?
It's the first time that there's an opportunity to really bring together a whole bunch of work that happens with young people and sort of contain it all under one bill. So this has been in the works from the government for around 5 years. And it's an opportunity to look at sort of the continuum of how we respond to young people across a whole range of sort of services when they're showing or displaying sort of antisocial and harmful behaviour. So there is actually a range of really good things in this bill that we should make sure that we acknowledge and that we can work with. Things like increasing the use of warnings and diversion for young people to sort of steer them away from the youth justice system. As discussed, there is, of course, also raising the age of criminal responsibility, which means that there'll need to be a different response to those young people. They won't be criminalised and drawn into the criminal justice system. There is also, as flagged, a number of things that we're concerned about. And sometimes this is a little bit, it'll be the devil will be in the detail. So it will be in terms of how these things get implemented. And that's things around police powers to detain young people. There's within the bill, there is, I should say, provision for police to detain 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds, even when the age of criminal responsibility is raised to 12. And so there's still an opportunity there where young people will be coming into contact with police and maybe sort of held until, I think the terminology in there at the moment is a suitable person can come and take them away. So there's a bit of a grey area there that's a bit of a concern, and we'd like to make sure that as soon as possible a young person is actually being dealt with by a social services organisation or family or community in a way that they can be safe and supported. There's a few other things in there. You did mention the electronic monitoring. There's absolutely no evidence that will work in any way, and that's quite a concerning thing to have in there. And there's also a couple of other concerning things. One around the ability for 16-year-old children to be sent to an adult prison. That's very concerning and should never happen. And there's also an erosion of something that we have in Victoria called the dual track system. And that's something that we're quite lucky to have in Victoria, or it's quite a good option for courts to be able to use, whereby someone aged 18 to 21 can actually be sentenced to a youth justice facility if the judge thinks that will be a better opportunity for them to get their lives back on track and to reintegrate with the community after that in a more successful way. So that's something that works really well in Victoria, but over the years, over sort of the past 5 to 10 years, we have seen that system kind of get eroded and sort of tightened down, so less and less people are actually getting access to that.
So what would be an advantage of that?
Of the dual track system?
Yeah.
The youth detention system is quite different from the adult prison system. And so within the youth detention system, there's certainly a whole range of things that could be made better about that system. But essentially, there's more opportunity to be engaged with education and a few other sorts of services that can help people get their lives back on track, so that when they're exiting out of that system and back into the community, that can be more successful. The adult system is a very harsh system, and some of that's about the experience in there, and some of that simply, if you can imagine people with weapons in the adult, and I mean the security guards and so on, and the people employed in the facility with weapons, and there being dogs and different ways to respond to behaviour within that system, whereas in the youth justice system, it shouldn't be that harsh. It should be an environment where people are supported to address what's going on in their lives. That could always be much better, and one of the reasons we want people supported in the community is because, it's certainly not perfect, but it is better than the adult system. So where a young person whose brain development might be a long way behind what their sort of physical age is, having access to the youth detention system instead of the adult system gives them a better chance of getting their lives back on track.
What you're saying is true in many ways. However, one of the things that I've been reading about and experiencing by doing countless interviews with First Nations people is that, that spit hoods are being used, and also they're very worried about the trialling of the electronic bracelet.
Yeah, the electronic bracelet is very concerning. I'm personally not familiar with the reports of spit hoods being used. That's obviously something that's abhorrent and should not be in practice. In terms of the electronic bracelets, it is something that as an organisation we've looked into before, because it has been proposed in the youth, sort of as part of the response to youth justice previously, and there's just no evidence it works. In fact, anecdotal evidence would be that if you're a young person and you have a bracelet, an ankle bracelet, that's something that's quite stigmatising and shaming, and it might mean that you disengage from some of your schooling or other sort of pro-social activities around the community because of that shame. And that would be a terrible outcome when we're trying to keep young people engaged or encourage engagement with these pro-social activities and with school and community and so on. If wearing an ankle bracelet means that they opt out, then it's having a really negative consequence far beyond what it's probably intended to do.
Can you comment on, you mentioned police powers and the fact that, we need to make sure that those police powers are not too much. Can you comment on community-led alternatives to police and prisons?
Certainly. There's a number of things up and running at the moment in terms of the ways that social service organisations are already involved with young people who are engaged with the criminal justice system. So at Jesuit Social Services, we have a number of services like YJ Assist, Youth Justice Support Service. We have independent, we have ISPs. I'm trying to remember what all the acronyms mean.
Yeah,
we have a number of services
Yeah.
where we are working really hands-on with people who have a lot of really complex things going on in their lives. And I might just take a moment to sort of remind people that the young people who end up in detention in Victoria, around half of them have had contact with our child protection system. Around 2/3 have experienced abuse, trauma and neglect. Around 2/3 are accessing mental health support at the time that they go into detention. And around a quarter have a history of self-harm and suicidal ideation. So often there is a lot of really sort of complex things going on with these young people. And these are things that are often much better responded to by people who are trained to deal with those particular issues, with trauma, with the mental health concerns and so on, rather than a police response or a punitive response or an authoritarian kind of response. So these very skillful staff already exist and are doing amazing work in the community and can be part of a response that doesn't involve police, or certainly not primarily involving police.
Absolutely, we need communities, not prisons, isn't it? Yeah. And we certainly need less tough on crime politics, which fails children and communities, and we need to implement, as you touched on, evidence-based alternatives which work and ensure that every child grows up with their family.
Absolutely. And, there's, in terms of what we know is already sort of working and in place, there is a range of things from, I should sort of flag that there's a few things in place, like a program called Navigator, cool. Which helps make sure that children who are disengaging or disengaged from education have a sort of a casework approach to working with them and their family and community to understand what's going on in their lives, to address some of those issues and to try and get them back on a pathway to re-engaging with school and therefore re-engaging with the broader community. There's a bunch of restorative programs as well, which I think is something I forgot to mention before, is in this bill is wanting to have more use of restorative approaches, which is a real positive. And that's an approach that seeks to restore relationships essentially between young people, potentially between the young person and the victim of something that's happened. Sometimes it's about restoring relationships within families, and it's a way of addressing concerns without a sort of a punitive approach in mind, without a tough on crime approach in mind, as you might say, but by helping young people understand the impact of their actions, and to also have them understood by the other people around them and what's going on for them in their lives, so that everyone can actually move forward together and can commit to a plan which moves everyone forward in a way that everyone's happy with, and and people can flourish.
Absolutely, and the Victorian government does need to ensure that that these programs happen. In fact, one example that I wanted to ask you to see if you would comment on this is the youth bail laws, which don't they need to be fairer for children by removing reverse onus bail provisions?
Absolutely. We would love to see a presumption of bail for young people in the justice system, and they are certainly too harsh at the moment, and children get caught up in, essentially spending time in a system that, it's like quicksand. Once you sort of come in contact with the youth justice system, it's very hard to escape. And over time too, once you come into contact with the criminal justice system, the younger you are, the more likely you are to go on to have further contact with the criminal justice system. So there's really something that's not working there that needs to be addressed. And that's where hopefully some of these changes and some of these cautions and diversions and restorative approaches that there is provision for in the bill will start to lead towards a situation where we're addressing these incidents outside of the criminal justice system and keeping children away from that and diverting and steering them away from that, and, as you say, with back with family and with community instead.
Well, I'm hoping that the Victorian government can maximise opportunities for children to be diverted at all stages of the legal process. It's approximately 4:35 and you're listening to an interview with Andrew Yule from Jesuit Social Services. Andrew, what advice would you give to a young person exiting prison? How can they be helped by Jesuit Social Services?
Well, interesting question, actually. I mean, there's a number of services out there to support people. There's certainly a very broad range of services. I think, finding a passion and getting engaged with that is where we see a lot of people really start to flourish. We've actually got a Jesuit Social Services started a school recently for young people. We're talking about boys aged 15 to 17 who come in contact with the criminal justice system. And the idea of that school is to really try and engage those young people on what their passions are, to really, fan the flames of that passion and to help them achieve, whether it's sort of a VCAL pathway or through an apprenticeship or whatever it might be, to really hold on to that and explore that and take that further. Because every young person that I've ever spoken to who's sort of getting caught up in the system, they don't actually have a dream of that being their life. They're, when you ask a young person what their hopes and dreams are, it's the same as anyone else you might talk to. It's about having a job and a car and a family and a secure and successful life. And so I think for a young person who has had perhaps contact with the criminal justice system and needs to reset their life a bit, there's still plenty of time. It's about finding something that's your passion that you can engage with and really move forward with.
We actually have a lot of Aboriginal people on this show, and also people from African communities as well, and refugees. And one of the things that's constantly coming out is racial profiling. And of course, we've got deaths in custody. There's an inquest coming up for Cleveland Dodd at the moment from Western Australia, who you may have heard of. But it's always good to connect everything to genocide and colonisation. But I really had you in here really to talk about the bill and how that pertains to young people. But also we need to make sure that we also shine a spotlight on people from different backgrounds as well.
Absolutely. I think one thing that was a program actually that Jesuit Social Services was engaged with for a little while, it's actually just finishing up unfortunately, is a Victorian Police Diversity Recruitment Program, which... Oh. Yeah, which I've piqued your interest. That program was in partnership with Victorian Police. They were really keen on this program as well and a great supporter of it, which actively sought to support people from diverse backgrounds, from African Australian backgrounds, and also there was an Aboriginal group that went through to support them in their applications to become members of the police force. So this sounds...
that would be very challenging.
A little interesting and challenging, and it is, but... this is a sort of work that's really interesting to be part of, because it helps, the outcome of this potentially, and it started to do this and it's been quite successful. But as I said, it has also just recently finished up, unfortunately, due to funding. But The benefit from a program like this is that the police force starts to represent the diversity of our communities.
I think that's good, but there would need to be a lot of healing, because of the transgenerational trauma of First Nations people in particular. But it is a positive. If it's worked through carefully and they're honoured, that could work.
It could.
It's a topic for another show.
Yeah, that's right. For sure.
But thank you for mentioning it, Andrew. I mean, I like your positivity. Yeah, I like your positivity. It's good to see, you know, week in, week out, we're always broadcasting very, very traumatic and disturbing interviews, and it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any final questions before we finish?
Look, nothing. I think, as I sort of mentioned earlier, just one thing I wanted to perhaps sort of finish on is that whilst the bill has been implemented or brought in, there is time for amendments. We are hoping to address perhaps some of those concerns that we have in terms of those police powers, in terms of the ankle bracelets, in terms of 16-year-olds being able to be sent to adult prison. And there is a second stage to this, which says that the Victorian government has committed to raising the age to 14 years old in 2027.
Oh.
Now, that's a long way down the track.
There'll be a lot of people dead by then.
There'll be a number of people who have been caught up in the justice system and harmed and potentially dead by then. But we've got an opportunity to see that through and to make sure that happens. And I don't think we should take our foot off the accelerator in terms of working hard to hold the government to account and make sure that does happen. So I just wanted to sort of make that statement that as a community of people who are engaged with this and want to see it happen, that all of us need to ensure that those changes all the way up to raising the age up to 14 do happen by 2027.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming onto the program. Before you go, are there going to be any submissions that need to be put in? I mean, has there been any
in response to the
stuff
bill?
For the second stage?
For the second stage, not that I'm aware of, no. So in terms of where the bill's at the moment, it's been introduced. We need to look for someone that can ask for amendments that we want to see happen to that bill. And then after the winter break, that the next sort of acceptance of that bill and so on will happen. In terms of what's happening for that second stage, I think we just need to stay tuned for that. As I say, it's a fair way down the track. So what the government wants to see happen is they want this first change to 12 to sort of take effect and for that to be going well. And then they say they're committed to then raising the age to 14 in 2027. We just need to hold them to account on that at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming in, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Stand in solidarity with Palestine this Sunday.
Hi, it's Nasser Mashni from Palestine Remembered, Australia's only dedicated show on Palestine. Join me every Saturday morning at 9:30 and very importantly, get along to our rallies. Sunday, 12 o'clock, State Library. Join us.
We have to mobilise to show our support for Palestine. 12 p.m, State Library, this Sunday.
Rally to demand freedom and justice for Palestine. No war on Gaza.
Free Palestine Melbourne is a 3CR supporter.
Apology to listeners. I think we might have had a slight technical difficulty there, which was swiftly corrected. It's approximately 4:43 and you just heard an interview with Andrew Yule, who is from Jesuit Social Services, who did an excellent interview on raising the age of criminal responsibility for young people and having a look at the Youth Justice Bill. I'm hoping to interview Monique Hurley in the coming weeks from the Human Rights Law Centre about that and looking at that further. Now, I wanted to bring your attention to Radiothon and the fact that the Doin Time show has met its target. And I wanted to really sincerely thank everybody that donated. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be reading out these donations now. So I can't remember what donations I've read and what I haven't. So I think to keep it simple, I'm going to read everything out. So it's Loretta, $50. Thank you very much. Pillar, and that was $50. Thank you very much as well. Ian, $20. Juliet, $50. Karina, $15. Isja, Melbourne, $30, although it says Alison there as well. Joseph, $100. Peter, $30. David Glantz from the Refugee Action Collective, $50. Meredith, $15. Claus and Cheryl, $70. Marion, $100. Abe, $100. Gab, $20. Joanna, $100. Vivian, $100. Matt, $20. Pierre, $50. And Peter has given another donation, $25. Thank you very much. Rob, $100. Leah, $50. Belinda, $10. And I think, and Michaela, $20. Thank you very much to everybody that donated, and I wanted to honour everybody that donated on this show and read out all the donations. I have actually just read out first names. It's kind of a little bit of an unwritten rule on the show that you don't read out, you just read out the first name. So it's approximately 4:46. Again, thank you very, very much to everybody that donated, and donate to all shows at 3CR. The theme is Sound on Solidarity. And I'm going to be playing you a song now by Ruby Hunter, and it's Women's Business.
Woman business in the home, with my fingers to the bone. Woman business in the home, woman business, live alone on the streets or in a home. She's a woman, not alone, with the children or a man. She's a woman
councils around the country will put on Disability Day events, and quite a few of them will not include people of colour, First Nations people and black people. So I think it's pretty cool that everyone you'll hear on air today will be a person of colour, and the majority of them will be people with disabilities as well. I think when we were preparing for this show and for this day, we wanted to talk about how we could explain the concept of power from the margins and why it is that we've chosen to focus on black people, Indigenous people and people of colour. And I think, in one word, it's intersectionality. It's the fact that people experience forms of oppression, different forms of oppression at the same time. And most people don't realise that you can't have racial justice without disability justice and vice versa.
We need to keep radical voices on air. Subscribe now.
Go to 3cr.org.au/subscribe or call the station on 9419 8377.
Do you have a fine you're worried about? If you are struggling to pay a fine, there can be ways to help you deal with it. You may be able to get your fine lifted or reduced where you are experiencing difficult life circumstances such as family violence, mental health challenges, disability, homelessness, or drug or alcohol dependency. If you have fines from not paying toll roads, you may also be able to get the fine waived if you're experiencing financial or other hardship. Speak to a community lawyer or financial counsellor to get advice on your options. You can find your local community centre on the Federation of Community Legal Centres website, fclc.org.au. You can find a financial counsellor by calling the National Debt Helpline on 1800 007 007. The Federation of Community Legal Centres is a 3CR supporter.
And you're back with the Doin Time show in case people have just tuned in. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. It's approximately 4:52 and we're nearing the end of our show. And I just wanted to thank David Pollack from ISJA, Indigenous Social Justice Association, Melbourne, for coming onto the show, and also thank Andrew Yule from Jesuit Social Services, who actually came into the studio and joined us and talked about the age of raising the age of criminal responsibility for young people and the Youth Justice Bill. You will be hearing more about this bill on an ongoing basis with the Doin Time show. And before I go, I just wanted to summarise some of the points from the media release put out by the Human Rights Law Centre. A special thank you to Thomas, the media officer from the Human Rights Law Centre, for finding Andrew for us. But basically, the Allen government must seize opportunity to transform Victoria's youth justice system, and the Human Rights Law Centre has called on the Allen government to be brave in transforming Victoria's youth justice system and the Youth Justice Bill 2024. And I wanted to draw listeners' attention to a quote by Monique Hurley, managing lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre. And she says, the Allen government has a choice to continue turbocharging tough-on-crime politics, which fails children and communities, or to implement evidence-based alternatives which work and ensure that every child grows up with their family and community. Children do not belong in prisons. Raising the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to at least 14 years old now is the bare minimum reform the Premier must action. This reform must apply to all children, no exemptions and no new police powers. Increasing police powers and pipelining more children into youth prisons is never the answer. The answer is always building up the community supports needed to help children avoid contact with and the harms caused by the criminal legal system in the first place. And I just wanted to summarise that media release just to show listeners about also some of the work that the Human Rights Law Centre has been doing. And do listen in to the NAIDOC radio broadcasts next week. You can find it on the 3CR website. There's going to be quite a lot of prison broadcasts during NAIDOC week within the prison. Dame Phyllis Frost and all the other prisoners as well in the country. And do support those prison broadcasts. It's really, really important. So it's goodbye from Marissa, and stay tuned every Monday for the Doin Time show, and stay safe and take care of each other. Doin Time show airs every Monday from 4 to 5. Thanks a lot. Bye.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast. If you found it valuable, please consider donating or subscribing to support independent community radio. To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au.